Welcome back for another deep dive. You know I love a good mystery, and this time we're going to dive into the fascinating history of coffee. And you guys have sent me just a huge stack of research on this topic.
Well, it's a very long history, and it's quite a winding one.
Yeah, so I'm excited to get into it. So how about this? Let's start with a clear mission for this deep dive. What are we really trying to uncover here?
Well, I think our goal is to really trace the journey of coffee from its humble beginnings to its status as a global beverage. We'll look at the legends, the trade routes, the cultural impacts. It's a pretty wild ride.
I love it. Okay, so let's start right at the source. Where did this magical bean first appear on the scene?
Our journey begins in Ethiopia, specifically the Kaffa region. Now, that name might sound familiar, and there's a reason for that. It's widely believed to be the origin of the word coffee.
Huh, coffee.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? But how did people even discover that these beans could be turned into a delicious beverage?
Well, that's where the legends come in. One popular story tells of an Ethiopian goat herder named Kaldi. He noticed his goats becoming unusually energetic after nibbling on some bright red berries from a certain bush.
Sounds like my kind of goats. What happened next? Did he try the berries himself?
He did. Intrigued by his goat's behavior, Kaldi decided to give those berries a try. And well, let's just say he experienced a similar boost of energy.
Uh-huh. So that's how coffee was born. A goat herder and his hyperactive goats. But how did coffee go from an Ethiopian hillside to the rest of the world?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. From Ethiopia, coffee made its way across the Red Sea to Yemen, and the port city of Mocha became a central hub for the coffee trade.
Mocha, Yemen. I've heard of that. It's like one of the classic coffee names.
Hmm.
But how did coffee go from a traded commodity to, something people actually enjoy drinking?
This is where we see coffee intertwining with religious practices. In Yemen, coffee became closely associated with Sufi Muslims. They used it to stay alert during late-night prayers and rituals.
Oh, wow. So coffee was almost like a spiritual aid, helping them maintain focus and devotion.
Exactly. And it makes sense when you think about the stimulating effects of coffee. It would have helped them stay awake and engaged during those long nights of prayer.
I can see that. But I imagine not everyone was on board with this new energizing beverage. Were there any objections?
You're right. There was some pushback. In fact, in the early 16th century, conservative imams in Mecca actually banned coffee.
They banned coffee. Why?
They saw its stimulating effects as too similar to alcohol and considered it a threat to religious piety.
Wow. So coffee found itself at the center of a religious debate. It's amazing how a beverage can spark such controversy. But did the ban last?
Interestingly, no. Within a few years, both the Ottoman Sultan and a Grand Mufti issued decrees permitting coffee consumption. Apparently, they realized that coffee, unlike alcohol, didn't lead to undesirable behavior.
So coffee was officially back on the menu. What happened once the ban was lifted? Did coffee culture start to blossom?
Absolutely. Coffee houses began to flourish, especially in Cairo and Mecca. These weren't just places to grab a quick drink, they were vibrant centers of social and intellectual life.
So coffee became the fuel for lively discussions and debates. I can picture those bustling coffee houses filled with poets, scholars, and thinkers, all sharing ideas over steaming cups of coffee.
It's a fascinating picture, isn't it? And this coffee house culture would soon make its way to Europe, ushering in a new era for coffee.
From those lively Middle Eastern coffee houses to the heart of Europe, that's a journey I can't wait to hear about. So how did coffee cross those geographical and cultural borders?
Well, there are a few pathways, but one of the most significant was through the Ottoman Turkish invasions. During battles like the one at Mohacs in 1526, coffee was introduced to Hungary, and within a year it had reached Vienna.
Coffee on the battlefield. Talk about a unique way to spread a beverage. So from the battlefield to the coffee pot, how did coffee go from a novelty to a mainstream European drink?
The Republic of Venice, with its vast trade networks, played a pivotal role. Venetian merchants brought coffee from their contacts in North Africa and the East, introducing this exotic drink to mainland Europe.
So Venice was like the gateway for coffee into Europe.
Mhm.
But I imagine not everyone was thrilled about this new beverage. Did it face any resistance?
You're right, coffee wasn't universally welcomed. In fact, some members of the Catholic Church saw it as the devil's drink, associating it with their Muslim adversaries.
Coffee caught in religious tensions again. It seems this beverage had a knack for stirring up controversy. But did coffee manage to overcome this devil's drink image?
It did, and the person who helped shift the perception was none other than Pope Clement VIII.
The Pope.
You're kidding.
Apparently he was quite taken by the taste.
Legend has it that after trying coffee, he declared that it would be a pity to let the infidels have exclusive use of such a delightful beverage.
Uh-huh. Well, that's quite the endorsement. I imagine that helped coffee gain acceptance within the Catholic community. But what happened next? Did Europe fully embrace coffee after that papal blessing?
Oh, absolutely. From that point on, coffee culture really started to blossom across Europe, each country adding its own unique twist to this beloved beverage.
I'm dying to hear about those unique twists. Did they start adding milk and sugar? Did they come up with new brewing methods?
All of that and more. We'll uncover those stories and more as we continue our deep dive into the fascinating history of coffee.
This is getting even more exciting. Stay tuned as we explore how coffee conquered Europe one cup at a time. Okay, so coffee has officially taken Europe by storm.
Mm.
What happens next? Where does this caffeinated conquest go from here?
Well, our journey takes us now to the vast and diverse continent of Asia. Coffee's arrival in Asia is a story woven with spirituality and adventure. It's quite fascinating.
Oh, I'm all ears. Tell me everything. How did coffee first reach Asian shores?
Let's start with India. The story goes that a Sufi saint named Baba Budan, on a pilgrimage to Mecca in the 17th century, smuggled coffee beans back to India. He was so captivated by the drink that he wanted to bring it back to his homeland.
A smuggling saint. That's dedication. Where did he plant these precious beans?
He planted them in the Chandragiri hills of Karnataka. And, those hills are now known as Baba Budan Giri in his honor. It's quite a legacy.
Wow. So coffee was literally smuggled into India by a saint. But did it catch on? Did India become a major coffee producer?
Well, India's coffee story has had its ups and downs, but Indian coffee is truly unique. It's often described as monsooned, which refers to a very specific process.
Monsooned coffee. I've never heard of that. What makes it so special?
During the monsoon season, coffee beans are exposed to the humid air and they swell up. This gives them a really mellow and unique flavor profile. It's something you really only find in India.
So from smuggling saints to monsoons, India's coffee history is one of a kind. But what about the rest of Asia? How did coffee spread to other countries?
Coffee's journey through Asia is a mix of colonial-influenced trade routes and, just evolving tastes. For instance, coffee was introduced to Japan by the Dutch in the 17th century.
Really? Japan, the land of tea ceremonies. I'm surprised they embraced coffee.
Well, it took a while. Japan was a fairly closed-off society for much of its history. But once trade restrictions eased up in the mid-19th century, coffee started to gain some traction. The first European-style coffee house opened in Tokyo in 1888. And from there, coffee culture slowly began to emerge.
From a closed society to a coffee-loving nation. That's quite a transformation. What sparked that change?
The late 20th century was a turning point. Instant coffee and canned coffee became super popular, especially among busy workers. And then, of course, the global coffee chains like Starbucks arrived, bringing their own distinct coffee culture to Japan.
So even a country with centuries-old tea traditions couldn't resist coffee's allure. It really is a global phenomenon. What about other Asian countries? Any interesting coffee stories from there?
Oh, absolutely. South Korea's coffee scene evolved in a really interesting way. Initially, coffee was enjoyed mostly by the elite in the early 20th century, but became more mainstream in the 1950s. And part of that was due to the influence of American soldiers stationed there during the Korean War.
So coffee was like a taste of American culture for Koreans back then.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Exactly. And then in the 1970s, the coffee mix was introduced. That's basically instant coffee with creamer and sugar all in one little packet. It became insanely popular, and it's still a staple in Korean offices today.
I can see the appeal. A quick and easy coffee fix, perfect for those busy workdays. I'm also curious about Indonesia. After all, Java is practically another word for coffee.
You're absolutely right. Indonesia has a long and rich coffee history dating back to the Dutch colonial period in the 17th century. The island of Java was a major coffee producer, supplying a huge chunk of Europe and America's coffee. That's how Java became such a common term for coffee.
So Indonesia's coffee heritage is literally ingrained in our language. That's amazing. What about other Southeast Asian countries? Any other notable coffee producers?
Well, the Philippines is unique in that it's one of the few countries that produces 4 commercially viable coffee varieties: Arabica, Liberica, Excelsa, and Robusta. Quite a diverse coffee portfolio.
4 different types of coffee from a single country. That's pretty impressive. And what about Vietnam? I've heard they're a big player in the coffee world these days.
Vietnam's a relative newcomer to the coffee scene, but they've become a major force. In fact, they're now the second largest coffee producer in the world, known for their Robusta coffee.
Wow. Vietnam's rise to coffee dominance is truly remarkable. It's amazing how coffee has become such a global commodity. Countries all over the world are vying for a piece of the market. But how did coffee go from those early plantations to such a massive global industry?
We can't talk about the globalization of coffee without mentioning the Dutch East India Company. They were a major force during the Age of Exploration.
The Dutch, of course. They had their hands in everything back then. What role did they play in the coffee trade?
They were instrumental in establishing large-scale coffee plantations, especially in their colonies like Ceylon, Sumatra, and Java. They basically broke the Arab monopoly on coffee production, making it a truly global commodity.
So the Dutch were really the ones who took coffee from a regional product to a global phenomenon. It's amazing how they shaped the coffee landscape we know today.
Absolutely. And as coffee production expanded, new players entered the game. We talked about Brazil becoming the world's largest coffee producer, but those high prices in Brazil encouraged other countries like Colombia, Ivory Coast, and Vietnam to ramp up their own coffee production.
So competition in the coffee market fueled even more coffee production. More coffee for everyone.
It does highlight how coffee is now an integral part of the global economy. Millions of people worldwide, from farmers to roasters to baristas, depend on coffee for their livelihoods.
It's true, coffee connects us all in a way. From the farms of Ethiopia to the cafes of Seattle, it's a drink that transcends borders and cultures.
Absolutely, and it's a story that continues to evolve. New trends are constantly emerging, from specialty coffee roasts to innovative brewing methods.
Speaking of new trends, I've noticed a surge in popularity for those fancy coffee drinks, lattes, cappuccinos, frappuccinos. How do those fit into the grand narrative of coffee?
Those are fascinating developments. They represent what some call a third wave of coffee culture. It's all about artisanal techniques, quality beans, and creative flavor combinations.
So it's not just about the caffeine kick anymore. It's about the experience, the craftsmanship, the artistry of coffee.
Precisely. Coffee has become more than just a drink. It's a cultural phenomenon. It's something to be savored and appreciated.
What an incredible journey. From ancient legends and daring voyages to global trade and cutting-edge brewing techniques, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have. It's remarkable how a simple bean has shaped so much of our world. But before we wrap up, there's one final thought I'd like to leave you with.
I'm all ears. What's the final sip of wisdom for our listeners? Okay, lay it on me. What's that final thought?
Well, as we've been tracing the history of coffee, we've seen its impact on economies, revolutions, religious debates. But as we look to the future, I think we really need to consider the ethical implications of our coffee consumption.
That's a really good point. We can't just enjoy our lattes without thinking about, where those beans came from and the impact of our choices. So what are some of the ethical challenges facing the coffee industry today?
One major concern is sustainability. Climate change is affecting coffee-growing regions worldwide, and that's threatening the livelihoods of millions of farmers. And as the demand for coffee keeps growing, there's pressure to clear land for more plantations, which leads to deforestation and habitat loss.
It sounds like our coffee habits could be contributing to some pretty serious environmental problems. It's kind of overwhelming when you think about it.
It is, but there's a growing movement towards sustainable coffee production. More and more farmers are adopting practices that protect the environment. Things like conserving water, reducing their carbon footprint, using shade-grown techniques.
That's good to hear. So as coffee drinkers, what can we do to support these sustainable practices? Are there any labels or certifications we should look for?
Absolutely. Look for certifications like Fair Trade Organic Rainforest Alliance. These certifications help ensure that farmers are being paid fairly and that their farming methods are environmentally responsible.
So we can actually make a difference with our purchasing decisions, choosing coffee that's good for people and the planet. It's empowering to know that we can have an impact.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions at your local coffee shop. Find out where they source their beans and what steps they're taking towards sustainability. The more we demand sustainable coffee, the more the industry will respond.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. It's amazing how coffee can spark these conversations about history, culture, economics, and even our own responsibility as consumers.
It really is a testament to the power of this simple beverage. Coffee has connected people across continents and centuries. And as we continue to enjoy it, let's be mindful of its impact and do our best to make sustainable and ethical choices.
Well said. This has been an incredible journey through the world of coffee. From its humble beginnings to its global influence, it's just mind-blowing. A huge thank you to you for sharing your expertise and guiding us through this fascinating history.
It was my pleasure. And to all our listeners out there, keep exploring the world of coffee, ask questions, and savor every sip.
Who knows? Maybe you'll uncover your own fascinating coffee story along the way. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.